نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon the last and final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Over the last few sessions, we've been discussing some of the etiquettes the reader should have when interacting with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We spoke in the previous session about the importance of a particular hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about the virtue and the significance of the Quran itself, where he said, "Ad-deenun nasiha," that religion itself is a sincere counsel. And among the things that he determined the religion to be a sincere counsel for, among them was the Quran itself. And this is the area that we focused on in quite some depth in the previous session. And we talked about the magnificence of the Quran and the importance it's given within the Islamic discourse. Today we're going to speak about another dimension of Quranic virtuousness and importance. There's one authentic report where the Prophet ﷺ said, بِئْسَ مَا لِأَحَدِهِمْ أَن يَقُولَ نَسِيتُ آيَةَ كَيْتَ وَكَيْتَ بل نسي واستذكر القرآن فإنه أشد تفصيا من صدور الرجال من النعم. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, "How evil is it for one of you to say, I forgot such and such a verse. Rather, he was made to forget it." So continue reviewing the Quran, for it slips away from the hearts of men faster than grazing camels. Profound. What are some of the potential interpretations of how evil is it for one of us to say, "I forgot such and such a verse"? And what should be said is, "I was made to forget that verse." What does that mean? Any thoughts with this? What's this prophetic prohibition suggesting here? Any thoughts? Punishment for what exactly? Okay, what else?
Possibly commit some sort of sin that's made you forget what you memorise.
Okay, what else? Anyone know?
Is that not putting what you learn into action?
Okay, but why is the Prophet prohibiting people from saying, "I forgot"? And he's instructing them to say, "I was made to forget."
So it goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the tawfiq to memorise and
Good. But why is it so important and vital that it's made him put forth a prophetic prohibition on the matter? Why is there so much significance in this prophetic prohibition?
It's not natural. Because you didn't remember it in the first place. You need to remember.
Okay, interesting. Uncle, what were you going to say, sorry?
Like when you forget Allah, I'll forget you.
Okay, when you forget, Allah will forget you. Excellent. Okay, some interesting interpretations. We're going to take a deeper dive into what some of the potential interpretations of this report are. So this hadith condemns from surface value to say, "I forgot a verse." Because simple forgetfulness implies neglect. Okay? So the Prophet emphasizes the revising of Quran because forgetting is easy and natural without review. But he instructs the people to say, "made to forget." And what that suggests is, number one, Allah allowed the memory to lapse due to lack of review. Or number two, it wasn't intentional abandonment or intentional disrespect. So we're going to look at some other wordings of the reports, and I'm going to shed some more light on this. There's another report from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud where he said, "لا يقول أحدكم نسيت آية كذا وكذا بل هو شيء نسي." Let none of you say, "I forgot such and such a verse." Rather, it's something that he was made to forget. In another report, Aisha says, أن النبي سمع رجل يقرأ القرآن. The Prophet heard a man reciting the Quran. To which he said, لقد ذكرني آية كنت أسقطتها. That may Allah have mercy on this man. He reminded me of a verse that I had let slip. This is a hadith in authentic report. So the Prophet ﷺ experienced this temporary forgetfulness, which is being referenced in these reports. Okay. Now, Why is the Prophet ﷺ prohibiting people from saying, I forgot a certain ayah? It's because when you forget something, there's layered language and phraseology behind the term forgetfulness. And a small example to understand is, imagine a relationship that means everything to you. Could be a friend you've known from childhood. Could be a grandparent that you've been sentimentally attached to ever since you were a young child. But this relationship means everything to you. But unexpectedly and uncontrollably, you're preoccupied with other affairs. And you forget to check up on this particular person. Days have gone by. That person's going to feel saddened and grieved that this person who considers me to be a fundamental part of his or her life hasn't checked up on me. When that person asks you, why haven't you checked up on me? Why have this so many weeks gone by without us having had a discussion? If the response was, I forgot, how would that be interpreted? What do you brothers think? How would that be interpreted? The simple response was, I forgot to contact you. Would that be a satisfactory explanation? It'd fill you with disappointment. Is that how low my worth is in your eyes? That you can simply forget me? We've known each other for 2-3 decades. We've shared so many difficult moments together. I've done so much for you and vice versa, and suddenly you forget me because you just forgot. It wouldn't be a reasonable explanation. So Allah is telling us, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that none of you should ever say, Nasitu ayata kada wa kada. I forgot this particular verse. For that phrase in and of itself, it fosters a sense of neglect and carelessness. The Quran holds no value because you memorize certain verses, you dedicated years of your life to those verses, and one day you just forgot. You wouldn't forget your parents. You wouldn't forget your siblings. You wouldn't forget your childhood friends that you've shared all your difficult moments with. You wouldn't forget that object that you've invested hundreds and thousands of pounds in because you foster a deep sense of attachment to those things. So how have you just forgot a Quranic verse? Here the Prophet ﷺ is revealing an element of Quranic abandonment that opens our eyes. That before we say these words, it's important for us to understand what they actually entail. Uthman ibn Affan does an interesting athar, a report that he said. He says, ما أسر أحد سريرة إلا وأظهرها الله على قسمات وجهي أو فلتات لساني. No one conceals an inner secret except that Allah brings it out, either on the expressions of his face or through the slips of his tongue. Very profound. If someone repeatedly says, I forgot the Quran, the idea of forgetfulness of Quran, it becomes normalized. So much so the Quran becomes an irrelevant part of that person's life. But if a person said, I was made to forget the Quran and I need to go back to it, they internalize responsibility, humility, and a desire to reconnect. What stems from our tongues is often a direct reflection of what's sat in our hearts. So if we're saying, I forgot the verse loosely, it's a sign the Quran's importance never really sat in our hearts in the first place. How are you saying you forgot something? Clearly you were never attached to it from the get-go. So we're being taught here the essence of value and worth. How does a person foster and cultivate a deep sense of worth and value for Allah's words? It's to understand that these words are unforgettable. And if you happen to find yourself in a situation where you've been made to forget certain verses, know something you did or something Allah has done has caused that forgetfulness. It could be a sin that's been committed. It could be that now worldly affairs have preoccupied you and made you forget what's more important, which happens to everybody. And one of the reasons why I quoted the hadith where Aisha said, radiyallahu anha, the Prophet heard a man reading an ayah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, لَقَدْ ذَكَّرَنِي آيَةً أَسْقَطْتُهَا, that he reminded me of a verse that I had let slip. He used a particular wording, phraseology. He didn't say a verse that I had forgotten. Asqattu. Asqattu in Arabic literally means to let something fall. That he reminded me of something that slipped out of my reach, pointing to his human capacity, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If he forgot a verse, forgetting a verse in and of itself isn't something that we're going to be held to account for eternity. Rather, it's a normal human condition. But here we're being taught that the more we accustom ourselves to speaking about the Quran while maintaining the highest form of etiquette, the more it builds a place of value and worth deep in our hearts. And here we learn that language doesn't just describe reality, it shapes how we think and how we feel. What appears on the tongue, behind that are years of bad habits, years of bad investments, years of wastage of time. Before a person uses foul language, a person insults or maligns, it's an indication that he's been busying himself with this type of behavior in his private life. And that's why the tongue becomes accustomed to those things. So here the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us, if you truly value and you hold the Quran in high regard, then it's evil for you to say such words that I forgot. And it's important for us to understand that if we say I forgot that surah, we're not falling into that category of people. It's not a literal prohibition. But here, it's more figurative. We're being taught here the value and worth of the Quran itself. What are some of the lessons that we can draw? Number one, your words reveal your inner state. And it calls for an inner refinement of our state itself. So the instruction isn't just to say, don't say I forgot. It's to point us towards the fact that the tongue leaks what the heart holds. And the face reflects what the soul carries. We're taught to look beyond the external value of something. We're taught to look beyond face value. It's not about what's fallen from your tongue. It's not about your behavior that you're projecting. It's more about what's caused you to fall in a position where you're saying, yeah, I forgot that surah. And you stop there. Or yeah, it's been a few days or a few weeks since I've read the Quran. Or do you know what? I don't think I can read properly anymore. What carries a person to say such words without any remorsefulness, without a deep sense of worry and concern? It's because the Quran has lost its high-ranking position in the heart of that individual. And that's what we talked, to look beyond what he's doing and focus on the root cause of the issue itself. And this is why the author is focusing towards this section of the book on the reports that magnify the Quran's virtuousness, its magnificence, its majesty. That it's not just a series of words and letters. This is something Allah has imparted to us so we can survive in this world. The only way to survive in this world, to brave the world's troubles and storms, to become stronger in our connection to God, to equip ourselves with the tools that we need to live the life that's required to enter into paradise, it's to follow the contents of the Quran. Unless we follow this book, we interact with this book, we develop a connection with this book, we lose ourselves. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He used this term forget in one particular context. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Do not be like those people who forgot Allah, so Allah made them forget themselves. They are the wrongdoers. So this real forgetfulness, it comes when we are truly forgetful towards Allah's essence, His book, on all of those things that carry divine value and worth. Number two, make Quranic reading a daily habit. It's something I've touched upon again and again. In this fast-paced Western consumerist society, it's very easy to lose touch of religious rituals. Yeah? And sometimes just praying salah, it doesn't give us that connection and that humility and that devotion. So here we're taught that we need to connect ourselves to something through which we can foster a deep sense of love. Read the Quran so often until reading those verses with the translation and understanding why those verses were revealed and asking yourself how they relate to you. Through doing those things, you'll find that the Quran will penetrate your heart and it'll become more than just a verse. From a verse, it becomes a stark reminder. From a few words, it becomes a message from someone you love. And from becoming just words that fade over a few days, it becomes words that become imprinted in your heart. You carry them everywhere with you. So to make Quranic reading a daily habit, is something that we can easily lose touch with in this fast-paced world that we live in. Morning to evening we're working. Afterwards we're catering for family-related responsibilities. Outside of that time we're busy with other distant family members. And then we have to take care of our children and other duties. But in the process, we find that the relationship with the Quran, it withers, it weakens, it loses its value and worth. So here we're pushed again by these reports to foster a deep sense of Quran. I mean, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ is talking about the Quran and making a prohibition and associating this action with something evil is telling us there are etiquettes that we have to maintain when interacting with the Quran. And that itself is indicative of the Quran's high-ranking station. All of this is all to do with our interaction with this book. Books have been written, volumes and volumes, discussing those etiquettes that we have to preserve when reading and connecting to this book. Number 3, see forgetfulness as a reminder, not a failure. This is a very important point. I remember the last time we spoke about something related to forgetfulness in Quran, one of the brothers said, only do hifz if you know you won't forget. One of the brothers said this. And it's these statements that we have to be wary of. Because quite often, when we find ourselves forgetting certain ayat, forgetting certain chapters we've memorized, it demoralizes us. But the Prophet ﷺ is not in any way demoralizing us here. He's saying, even if you continue to forget, it's fine. But understand that you were made to forget. It's not out of abandonment. It's not out of neglect. You love Allah and His Messenger. Something calls you to forget this book. Don't let your tongue say something that could foster an indirect sense of disrespect for this noble book. So here we're taught, see it as a reminder, not a failure. No matter how many times we forget verses in surah, we shouldn't stop trying to attempt to memorize what we can. I know that some of the punishments that have been mentioned concerning forgetting Quranic verses can be quite petrifying. But here we're taught that what's even more petrifying is losing a connection with the Quran. And that's sometimes a gateway shaitan uses to capitalize on the slave. That you're forgetting Allah's verses. Don't memorize. So he stops attending those weekly lessons in the mosque. He stops listening to those surah on the train when going to work. He stops connecting to the meanings of those verses that he was memorizing. And after a few months, he finds himself in a position where he has no relationship with the book at all. This is all because shaitan exploited his vulnerability. Shaitan used that moment of weakness against him and weaponized it. So here we're taught that forgetfulness is a reminder to eliminate forgetfulness. It's not a reminder to succumb to failure. It's not a reminder to surrender and say, I'm not going to memorize. We're pushed, continue your journey, and everyone's on their own journey. Some people have a journey of just memorizing Al-Fatiha. Some have a journey of memorizing a handful of chapters from the back of the Quran. Some have memorized the vast majority and are working on completing their hifz. It's not about how much you know or how much you're looking to memorize. It's about the essence, the worth, and the purpose behind that connection you have with the book itself. Continue renewing your spirits. Continue replenishing your goals and your ambitions. For Allah loves that person that works towards connecting with Him, especially when it comes to the Quranic discourse itself. It's not forgetfulness. It's not failure. It's a reminder to persevere. It's a reminder to keep our heads up and keep going. So here, this hadith itself, although reading this hadith, we draw just a handful of benefits to do with our speech and our connection. It's something we can speak about for hours at end. Because here we're taught many subliminal lessons. And among them is that foster such a connection with the Quran that when forgetfulness of this book is mentioned, your heart skips a beat. The same way if someone said to you, imagine forgetting your mother. Imagine forgetting your children. The same way your heart would skip a beat because you can't imagine life without them. The same sentiment should be experienced when we speak of the Quran itself. You know, there was one former Guantanamo Bay prisoner, and he was asked something about the Quran, and it brought him to tears. Because he shared some of his experiences, that whenever they would have a mushaf in the prison cells, the guards would try to decimate that mushaf in some of the most humiliating ways. So he said, we stopped keeping masahif out of the fear of these guards disrespecting Allah's words, decimating Allah's words. And we would learn through oral transmission from each other. And these people, when they spoke about the Mus'haf, they longed to lay their eyes on the Mus'haf. They say, we can't wait for the day where we're free just so we can gaze at Allah's words. We can hold the Mus'haf in our hands and we can connect to it. Because they valued that book. Imagine what forgetting the Quran meant for them. They couldn't imagine life without the Quran. Hourly, secondly, oral transmission of Quranic verses. In a place where if they forgot the Quran, they would be exempt. Because they're under tyranny and oppression. They're under captivity. But still, the Quran held a higher ranking station and worth in their hearts than it does in ours. Why? Because they fostered a deep sense of care and respect. So, there are so many lessons we can draw from this. Among the most important is before the Quran, materially, it allows us to gain high-ranking levels in this world. It has to settle in our heart in a proper way first. If the respect, the worth, and the perspective isn't there, nothing else is ever going to materialize. You know, when it comes to our children's clothes, we're willing to spend lots of money. It comes to maths and English and science, we'll empty out our pockets because I want my kids to be smarter than my neighbor's kids. Yeah? When it comes to Quran, I'm not paying more than £7 an hour. Yeah, I know it's less than minimum wage, but it's just Quran. The value for Quran has been reduced to just a few pounds. So here we're taught until the Quran in our hearts and minds holds that value, nothing of its benefits will materialize in our lives. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ is trying to convey to us here. The worst thing you can do is to say, I forgot a certain verse. Because what forgetfulness entails is neglect of its content, abandonment of its lessons. Lest that happens, ensure that you say, I was made to forget. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow the Quran to sit in our hearts in a way that it's intended to. We ask Allah to allow us to connect to this book and to foster a deep sense of love for the words and for the Creator Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وأتوب إليه